time. We need some coffee.
Go on, little buddy, get on over there.
Woo! Boop. Beep. Boop. Boop. Oh, just a little bit. Oh, come on, come on. Oh.
Oh, mama.
Now that we've had our coffee, it's time for the stream to begin. Good morning, IronAge. Grab your pens, grab your brushes. Let's get creative. Woo!
Howdy, one and all. This is episode 1 of IronAge. Wait, let's do this right.
IronAge Legends!
Woo! Well, whoa there, some voice
Modulation stuff going on. Hold on.
I don't think that was bold enough.
I think you're right, yeah.
We gotta go bolder.
Bolder, bigger, better, faster than before.
We'll
put ordinary videos to death the way that we put Thraxa to death in your the Dark Augment stream, isn't that right? For those who know, you know. For those who don't, go check out the Lord Otter's video. He's been running he's the DM of a campaign we've been running called Dark Augment on his channel, and I think if we could edit it down, then we can make it a lot more digestible. But we'll figure that out later. Anyway, how's everybody doing in the chat? Oh, let's see. We got A.S. Bruner. Afternoon, everyone. It is afternoon. I'm saying it's morning because I'm sick and tired. Brian McCoppin, what a man. Let's go effing, like FLA music says. Woo! By Tim O'Burnham, Allison Wade, Skunk's Workshop. That's a fancy intro. Animation Overload.
Hail, everyone.
Hail. Thank you all for coming here. This is the inaugural episode, the initial episode of IronAge Legends.
Hell yeah.
Sure enough, I'll come up with an intro just for this kind of stream, but you guys will have to watch that silly video until then. The Lord Otter, how are you doing this afternoon, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. It's been a pretty slow and groggy Sunday morning and afternoon, but I can't really complain myself. How's everything with you, Kahuna?
I am sick, but I have the power of my kahunas behind me.
With the power of Kahunas, we shall prevail.
We shall prevail. Now let's see. We're going to go right here. There we go. So, presenting Steel and Stormbright, The Curse of the Star Wraiths by the Lord Otter.
Evela is just saying Shadow Raid Legends? Oh my god.
This stream is sponsored by
Raid Shadow Legends! Get your free bosses today!
Who needs my book when you can sell Raid Shadow Legends? Of course.
Do you mean Raid Shadow Legends, or do you mean
Raid Shadow Legends?
That one.
Oh, okay, just checking. It's a good thing to check. But guys, art by Neutron Boar and Umbrella Cat. I almost said Kitty Cat something, but you know. And this covers Neutron Boar, and it's dude, it's so good.
Oh yeah, he did a banger job with it. Both him and Umbrella Cat did an amazing job with the interior art as well. I couldn't be happier with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now I'll stop presenting for a second, and hey, just tell them about how long this process took in the beginning of this process, while I prep the next stuff that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, so the whole writing process for The Curse of the Star Raids, at first I had no clue what I was doing whatsoever. And I was hoping to get it done within a year, but then that time quickly doubled. So it went from starting out as sort of epic fantasy story, kind of chosen one, into something that's a lot more freeform, a lot more sword and sandal, swords and sorcery, weird magic, high fantasy, but also some grit there to really help get you invested. So it's been quite a learning process for me, and it's certainly been a learning process for my characters.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Raid Shadow Legends? Wait, what's happening? Yo, Sword Rush is here. Oh, has Allison Wade worked with the Boar as well? He's worked with everybody, so it wouldn't surprise me. But I've seen her covers. Her covers are not the typical fantasy I read, but they're very on brand for that style of fantasy. And her work is really good as well, if you guys haven't read it.
Yeah, they're on my reading list for sure. I've seen her covers, and I'm always left intrigued. It seems like a really unique flavor of fantasy that I want to get into.
Absolutely, 100%. So, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the thing, or the kahunas, if you will, I'm going to read a small snippet from the story here. Just an intro, one of the scenes that made me really fall in love with this story of yours. So, we'll see right here. We'll share screen, and we'll go right here. There we go. And maybe we'll even just go like, there we go. There we go. We don't need to be in this, right? It's fine.
No, we don't need to be in it. We'll let them do the talking.
Of course. Need to really set the scene here. There we go. At first, he thought it was Sethras who had found him. Zolan smiled in relief, moving to the hill summit to try to survey his surroundings. No one was there. Zolan! The voice spoke out again, only this time it appeared to come from the heavens themselves. The youth became frightened. How could he bear his own name being spoken if it wasn't his brother? It couldn't have been the other men of Harskull. They were too far away for everyone to find them. The weather had become too violent. So who was this other person who called him? That is when he saw it. Out of the rain and wind there emerged a figure who towered high over everything else. Though it was human-like in appearance, its eyes glowed with a thunderous supernatural fury. Each stride sounded like a thunderclap, a long mane waving independently of its surroundings. Zolan trembled where he stood, realizing that this figure had to be some sort of deity. Of course, he had heard tales of men speaking with gods before, but he never thought he would be the one to have such an encounter. Kalamtu, he thought. Yes, it had been their shaman who told them stories of this deity. Like most of the other gods who dwelt in this world, the Master of Storms was said to be unpredictable in his behavior. One could be reduced to cinders just as they might be giving his blessing. Kalamtu was known as a god of might, one who wrought terrible destruction for all who stood in his path. Zolan couldn't believe himself. This storm was his doing. And that is an intro scene, one of the, a portion of the intro to the Lord Otter's book, The Curse of the Star Wraiths.
Well, I have to say that was an amazing narration.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I had to go for the gravelly kind of intro just because my voice is gone, bro.
That was high production value, 100%.
Yes, I am a professional. If anybody wants their work done by me, better get in line. Anyway. So, Lord Otter, what was your reaction when I asked you to be the first episode of IronAge Legends hosted on my of my channel with its millions of subscribers and fans.
Well, I have to say it's quite the honor. I never thought I'd be the first to a new series of promotional videos for indie creators. It's definitely an honor, man.
I really
never would have
appreciate it, man.
imagined.
No, that's something I love about the Iron Age. It's not all of these individual. It is, but hear me out. It's not a series of individuals working on their own projects in the same space without any connection. There's a collaborative nature at the heart of this community within the Iron Age, and that's one of the things that I love about it most. Individually, some of us are talented enough to make it big, but together, apes together, strong.
Yeah, and even with this project, for a little while, it almost felt like I was going around in circles until I finally reached out in the Gilded, and that's where good beta readers really come into play. I'm not. It's not just me who wrote this story. It was at least 3 or 4 others who read through it, and they were like, I really like what you've got here, but it needs just a little work here and there because I didn't fully know what to do. And they
100%, man. Everybody needs guidance. It's you don't become a master of something on your own. Everybody needs helpers, teachers, and comrades along the way.
Yeah, and that's whenever this first book really started being finished. That's whenever I really started getting confident in it.
100%, man. Also, welcoming to the chat, we are being joined by Wrangler, and speaking of Doms, Maji Chan. Welcome to the chat, y'all.
Hail.
Now, guys, this is the first and only time I will ever ask this. Not maybe the only time, but this first time I'll ever ask it on this channel. And that is, please hit the like, subscribe, and share it if you feel desire in your heart to, because this show is very important to me, and I want it to become something much bigger than what my channel has been up to this point. So if anyone would be willing to do that, I would. My kahunas would swell in their feeling for you.
And that's why he's sponsoring Raid Shadow Legends. No, I'm kidding.
Sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends and Black Rifle Coffee. No. Oh, especially after the A Drink with Crazy stream today. No, but anyway. So the way this is going to work is where most of the intros are going to be something like what you guys have just seen here, maybe with a better video to introduce this particular show from here on out. But I'll do a quick reading of a passage of a story if it's a story, or a portion of music if it's someone who does that. And what will make this show unique is that not only will I interview the Lord Otter about his book and his projects, how it went, the future of it, but we also chose a discussion topic beforehand that is related to content creation. Do you remember that subject, the Lord Otter?
Yeah. We're also talking a bit of storycraft on top of just details about my own book. So that it sounds like that's going to be a running theme for pretty much everybody who's on here, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that's it, 100%. Because they're like, while I enjoy interviews with content creators, authors, writers, the like, I think there needs to be something more. Because if we're just talking about ourselves, we're gonna run out of things to say after about maybe 5 or 6 minutes. So we'll go into that somewhere as the interview goes on. But alas, for the first question I wanted to ask you, Lord Otter, in particular, is what kept you from writing a book before this? Because I think, like me, you've always kind of had stories in your heart and in your soul that you wanted to share with the world. What prevented you from writing a story before you wrote this one?
Right, and a lot of it, I believe that creative part of me was always there. It kind of been just, it's always been there in the background, just kind of like silently observing, taking in good stories. But I had kind of funneled myself down a different career path, and I sort of told myself in the past, oh, well, I love great stories, but maybe I'll do something with it someday, but it's off here to the side. But as I kept going and life kept happening, you go through highs and lows of your life. And I think this adds to that part of you as well. It helps build these types of stories that you have in your heart. And so it came to a certain point after a couple of years ago where I went through a particularly rough part of my life. And that was when I kind of just said on some level, all right, I'm going to write. I don't even know fully what it's going to be. I don't know what the final product is going to look like, but I just feel like I need to write. And it kept going from there, and it was surprisingly easy to do it. Just put in an hour or two each day, and slowly but surely over time, you get something that's a lot more tangible. And it changed over time and everything, but
100%. Stories always do. In fact, that's going to be the topic of this of our discussion here partially today as well, is how stories change over time. We'll both talk about it, how that happened in your story, and then talk about other examples that we're aware of as well.
yeah, mine certainly changed over time. I'm not even going to pretend like I'm the master of what happened in this narrative. It came to me, not the other way around.
100%. Also, anyone who has questions for the Lord Otter in the chat, feel free to ask them, and I will sprinkle them in here and there as we go. So in regards to your story, I've talked to you a bit about this in the past, but this was more of an epic fantasy story that was intended to be at least two or three times longer than it is. How long was it was that the idea in your head before you changed it into more of a pulpy story like it is now?
Well, so a lot of how this story came about was I was actually going through a lot of the inspirational reading for like Appendix N, kind of introduced and kind of mentioned in a lot of the different editions for D&D. And that's kind of like where a lot of those ideas started building up. I'm not going to say it was all just classic fantasy. There was also some modern influence in there. In fact, I was reading through some of Robert Jordan whenever I first penned the first draft.
Yeah, I'm just about finished with the Eye of the World right now. My first finished read anyway.
Yeah, and especially for like my first time writing a full length novel, that kind of influenced a lot of what happens, especially early on. Not so much later, but the original length for this story was a little over twice as long as what it ended up being. The final draft is around 50,000 words. Originally, it was supposed to be 120,000.
Yeah. And truth be told, if you continued down the epic fantasy route, it would have gotten even longer than that.
Yep.
Because that is the nature of that particular subgenre.
And there were a lot of parts I didn't like about the first draft. I distinctly remember reading through it once or twice before I started revising it, and just it felt like I was kicking myself every step of the way. It's like, oh, this feels cliche. I don't like this. This is way too wordy. It feels like it's telling you what this character is feeling instead of showing you. I don't like a lot of that. And so
and there are, truth be told, there are instances, sorry for the interruption, where
no, it's fine.
It does just make more sense to tell rather than show. But especially things that are like emotionally or character based, it's very important to consider finding alternate ways to show that rather than just say it. It's like, instead of saying he was angry, you could say his hands clenched, the sweat on his brow poured down as he clenched his teeth, something of that nature.
Right, and especially with this first book, it was also kind of a test of me reading a lot of different work and figuring out what spoke to me the most as a reader and a writer. So whatever affected me the most would inevitably come through in my writing. And what I found more and more was a lot of sagas and series that are charged with emotion that you feel. That resonates with me a lot more than a lot of stories which are more introspective, which those are fine in their own right. But I especially love those moments where it's like, it doesn't even need to be said anything. You just know what's happening. You know the motivations of all the characters. You know how they feel, and you get a vague feeling of what's going to happen. And it's how all of that kind of like follows through that I really love. And that came out more and more as I just kept kind of like revising, also talking with beta readers, having it be kind of like polished up. That was where a lot of that came from.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, having a good writing partner or like critique partner and or betas, you need both. I think most people need both to truly excel and become better in their writing.
Oh
Truth be
yeah,
told.
definitely. Yeah, I've
And
had
for
about
and for you, like who was the first person who you had helping and looking at your work and considering things of that nature?
so yeah, it had before the last 3 or 4 beta readers who really helped polish up my work. I kind of took a more typical approach, and there is a danger to this where you are sharing it with friends and family. They are going to tell you what they think is wrong with it, but it may not always be the right advice. So sometimes it can lead you down the wrong path, not always. Or they can touch on the problem, but not really get to the source of it. That's also kind of something you have to learn how to deal with as a writer. And I realized some of that early on, but it was more later whenever I showed this story to Black Knight, Sybil, Billy Bob Sack, and then Gino, where there was a lot more in-depth talk about what was good, what worked for what I was going for, and what needed fixing up. And each and every one of them
100%,
had
yeah.
a different angle, which really, really helped.
Also, how do we? There, I think we have a hater here in the comments. Some guy named Billy Bob Sack. Are you familiar with that guy? I don't know.
Yeah, he's some Mogwai dude who also helped write my book, or revise it, basically.
Okay.
He didn't
My
help
mistake,
write it per se, but he definitely pointed out a lot of what didn't work. He also made a few parts that go just a little farther.
But look at that profile picture too.
Yeah, that is also the Boar's work.
Yeah, no, and this scene is from no, I'd say the first half of the book, but this is not like a cover illustration, guys. This is just like an interior, which the vagueness and distances of look at all of this, dude. I've worked with Neutron Board before. I didn't know he could do stuff like this.
Yeah, it was. I was excited to kind of work with him after he'd worked on my cover, because the cover was the first thing he had really worked on, and I eventually kind of reached back out to him, started talking, saying, "Hey, you know what feels right for this kind of story? Interior illustrations." I'd suggested a lot more at first, but he's like, "Let's go with 6 illustrations. See where we go from there." And
Absolutely, man.
I went, okay. Well, I gave him some details about my story, about my world. He's like, "Man, I really like this." Eventually comes back with the illustration of Calamtu, and I go, "Holy shit!"
Yeah, that one was quite something, quite exceptional in my opinion.
Yeah,
it's maybe the best interior, which is hard to it's a hard thing to say because look how good this looks. It's insane.
Yeah. All of these I am just in love with. I think he did a phenomenal job with the illustration art, as well as Umbrella Cat's art, which she had dealt a lot more with kind of like smaller illustrations that are kind of like more in line with the text, but they work just as well, just in
less a scene,
aspects.
more like an aspect of a scene kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and I love that variety. That's something I really like about a lot of different editions of kind of like Robert E. Howard's work. You also see it a bit in some of Razorfist's writing as well, where you have kind of like that variety of artwork to help kind of spice up the scene.
Oh, 100%. And this has that pulpy feel. I will talk about some of the kind of small criticisms I had about the story as we go on a little bit in small detail. But for anyone who's not sold, yes, Herman P. Hunter, he's the author responsible for The Revenant and the Tomb and the Wizard's Stone. Fantastic author in and of himself. I'm sure I'll have him on here one of these days if I can wrangle him. But yeah, check this out. If anyone's not sold, I did a reading of this portion of the book in the beginning. This is Calamtu, the kind of Zeus-like figure of this world. Maybe less slutty, but you know. And then we have the diminutive kind of Zolan, or as he will become known later in the story, Stormbright, and or Mage, or Sorcerer.
Yeah, and the whole story about them becoming Steel and Stormbright was something that I had never originally planned. I was around halfway through writing the final version of the book whenever that actually came to me, because the name and the title just hit me. And I went, man, I really want this to be their names, but they already have names. But in context of the story, just what they go through, it kind of makes sense that they eventually adopt those names with how much they're kind of broken down in the beginning. So it's kind of like a story of rebirth in a sense, which I just love the idea. And I kind of had to run with it once that just kind of came to me.
Once that was established. Yeah, no, you and I and a few others in our kind of space have discussed this as well, and it's incredible, man, what the power is in a name. And in your particular story, a lot of things changed once they started going by other names. Is there anything in your personal life that kind of speaks to that, or or your belief system, or something of that nature?
Yeah, I've kind of moved around quite a bit growing up, and through kind of like family and friend connections, I love them to death, but you can see kind of like in certain towns I've lived in over time, there's sort of like that pessimistic mentality that things are slowly getting worse. There's nothing you can do about it.
There is no hope.
Yeah,
That kind of thing.
and I think that kind of bled into parts of this in some way. This is almost a response to that, because at first I saw a lot of that in my youth, just growing up in a small town, but you see it, kept seeing more and more of it.
Sorry, I'm just trying to sell this image a little harder. That's all.
But you kept seeing it more and more in a lot of mainstream media, a lot of movies, TV shows. What started out as pessimism became straight up nihilism, that nothing will get better, nothing ever even mattered to begin with. So I don't know. Without getting
like, I'm sure you've read quite a bit of fiction and fantasy specifically as well, and I'm sure you've met, or not met, but you've encountered authors who you can tell that the vision of the way they view the world, the way they view people, and the way they view life is so dour, so depressing. There is no God, there is no hope, there's nothing of substance. The world is getting worse, and people have always been crappy. And that's how they view the world. It's very hard to get through stories like that sometimes.
And the problem is that a lot of these stories, the author will...
Sorry, real quick. Timo, absolutely not. I will not stop harassing this art. I have a reputation to maintain, so...
The problem is with a lot of these authors, they will hammer this point home to the detriment of the fantasy of their own story, which I think really harms the final product. Because if you're writing sci-fi or fantasy and you are trying to create a sense of wonder, the moment you really start hammering home nihilistic themes, and especially start deconstructing your own mythology, you're kind of ruining your own story at that point. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and this story alone was kind of a response to, in a lot of ways, to what I love about a certain kind of like adult seinen manga series, kind of like Vinland Saga, a little bit of Berserk. It's kind of like
even a little bit of Vagabond. There's just a bunch of that as well.
Yeah, there's elements of that more adult style of manga and anime, and even elements of grimdark. But I still wanted this to be a tale of optimism at the end of the day. It's
absolutely
kind of like the story. As the old saying goes, the brightest light casts the darkest shadow. Well, I think you also need shadow to pronounce the light. Something I kind of picked up from Bob Ross. You need that dark side of things to really kind of like highlight how good things can be as well.
The brightest light seems brightest in the dark. And Timo brings up a good point here. Timo, he's a fantastic Iron Age author. In fact, I have one of his books, The Black Saint, resting somewhere back here. But yeah, no, you can go brutal without having to be nihilistic, and I think that's absolutely true. And that being said, if a story is done well enough, I think you can have like someone who does have nihilistic tendencies still produce a book or art that is worthy of my attention.
Yeah,
I would argue A Song of Ice and Fire it's very nihilistic, but it does still appeal. Or Joe Abercrombie's First Law trilogy does that as well, even though that last book in the series pissed me off.
well, you can also have nihilistic main characters, but still have a story that kind of stands for hope and perseverance. Like, I think Vagabond is a really good example of that. Having a main protagonist who essentially believes in nothing at the very beginning, but steadily goes through a learning process as he kind of goes through more trials and tribulations and several epiphanies throughout his whole journey.
And here's a question I wanted to ask you about your story. After you answer this question, we're gonna try canceling the stream in record time. You'll see why. But a lot of stories, especially, and I think this story, based on what you've said on and off stream, and to me privately as well, do you think the kind of pain and life experience that you poured into this story is well represented in the pages themselves? Do you think you're able to communicate what you wanted to communicate within the text of your story?
I believe so, and it was one of the things I wanted to spend the most time on, just because, I mean, my own life experience isn't one-to-one with these characters, but I wanted the emotions of what they go through and how they learn from it to be as close to, as impactful as I can without it getting ridiculous. That was very much the idea of how can going through a bad experience, learning from that, actually turn you into a better person, because it can easily destroy you just as well. But
even from a story like perspective, you could have had a downward arc, and arguably you kind of do with the one of the antagonists of the story, don't you?
Yeah, and I wanted to make her just as human as the heroes, despite the fact that she is very, very clearly a villain, and in many ways she's kind of a psychopath. But I still want to make her human in her own way, even though technically she isn't, but whatever.
It's a sentient creature in a fantasy story. They're all people on the inside, guys, just letting you know. Except for some small examples. And cancel the stream as Kofor Kahuna is about to drop a deuce. You guys ever see a full-grown set of kahunas on stream before? No.
I'm gonna go ahead.
We are about to present another piece of art that is going to tie into our theme of stories and things changing over time. I'm not going to show all of this piece of art, but you know exactly which art I'm talking about, correct?
I'm afraid I do, yeah.
I'm afraid. Let's see how far I can go
yes.
down. I think that's as far as we can go. So what ended up altering some of the more impactful scenes in your story? So like art and writing, as like kind of they're codependent on one another, especially in this particular style of story. Yo,
Yeah.
Chill Kid, we got Chill Kid joining us as well. That's fantastic.
Yes, Chill Kid, they are certainly Bobs. But yeah, this illustration is a great example of how the story has changed in certain ways over time. For one, whenever Neutron Boar kind of penned up this illustration, I had given him a little bit of a different description before, but what he came up with was so good that I slightly changed what was there. Originally, she's supposed to be praying to an idol of a falcon, because kind of like the
she
god
is a falconer, and that's the name of her position. It's kind of how people view them, as birds of prey, above all else, looking down on their next victim.
Right. They're also viewed as a symbol of elegance, which is kind of also the symbol of their goddess Ilgrathier. But especially with kind of like the more sensual nature of the scene, Neutron Boar changed this to the goddess herself, with some more provocative imagery, let's say.
Let's say there's a reason I haven't scrolled down even one step further.
But yeah, this was kind of like there was a lot of changes to the villain character, General Karst herself, because originally she was not meant to be near as sexy as she is now. Like, in fact, she was meant to be more of the exact opposite, sort of like a rather domineering figure. But over time, the more pulp I kind of like digested and became influenced by, you start seeing this running theme of more femme fatale like figures that are domineering. And it's one of the things I really like about Swords and Sorcery. It's kind of like, in a weird way, showing the strength of men and women in their own way. And
in
many
their
ways,
respect,
General
in their
Karst is
respect, like
that.
they have, well, men and women have more in common than they don't, but the differences have a profound effect, especially in the context of a story where everything is exaggerated to make its point, especially in fiction. I think that's why we like fiction, because like a historical text or a non-fiction text will show us reality through the lens of someone viewing it, usually a historian or somebody who's commenting on a recent event. But what fiction has the ability to do is fiction has the ability to take the deepest parts of who man is, what nature is, what God is, and exaggerate it to tell, like, basically to illustrate. I'm having trouble with my words here, but you know what I mean. Fiction has the ability in its exaggeration to more effectively prove a point or display the nature of mankind and God and nature.
Right, through the art of storytelling, it can give nuances that a regular conversation wouldn't. It can help you see from a different perspective. And one of the elements of this that really kind of ended up coming through in the final form of this book was the idea that Alcaron and the goddess Ilgrathia are kind of a symbol of both graceful beauty, but how that can be turned towards rather devious purposes. She is a god of beauty and lust, but also war. So that is very much part of who the villain General Karst is. She is a falconer where she is given a drop of her goddess's blood, which augments her strength. She's more cunning. She can actually beat up most average males without a problem even, but she is also graceful. She is beautiful, which is
she's also manipulative. She also displays the worst aspects of femininity, like being manipulative and cunning and dangerous in a very different way than most traditional villains.
Right, and that's something that was not planned from the beginning. It just kind of came along as the story just developed and evolved over time, and I'm all the happier for it. Because, arguably speaking, knowing what I do about her character, General Karst is one of my favorite characters of the series. And that's without a doubt.
I'll say this. In the context of a story, when you say a favorite character, you don't always mean your character that you think is the best or the most relatable. When people say that, they mean character they enjoy reading about the most. And as an antagonist, she is one of... I think... You know what? F it. I'll say this. She is the best antagonist I've read in an Iron Age story so far, and that's a very high compliment in my opinion.
Well, that's a very high honor I'm going to take. The reason why I say she's my favorite character though is I like the little idiosyncrasies that's there in her character. She, I know I've heard this description for some characters like Solomon Kane in the past. What makes them so interesting is all the little contradictions they live with. And I wanted her to be something like that, only obviously more of a villain than kind of like a paragon or hero.
Well, like, that's the thing too, but like I'll describe certain things about her. She is manipulative, she is devious, she is sensual, but she's also, in a weird way, devout and loyal. And all of those things about her can be true at once, which is part of the nature of human beings. We are sinfully born creatures, but we can still have good virtues despite that. And in a villain, I think that's a really interesting way to go. It's more complicated than most pulp story style villains. I'm sure you're aware of that as well.
Yeah, and I don't get me wrong, I still love the format of heroes and villains. That's certainly what I want this series to be part of. I don't want to do some weird deconstruction where you sympathize with Karst more than the heroes. That's not really something I want to do, but I do want to show the human elements to both sides, how they got to going along the path that they are. And it can be for good reasons or bad reasons, but like they say, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
It's true. I'm sure everybody. I'll even in examples in my life, there were people I tried to take care of, but in me taking care of certain people in my past, I enabled their abuse of others unknowingly, and it's something that I think everybody has experienced at some point. Good intention without good judgment and experience doesn't usually account for very much. And also, look at this interior illustration. This is so dang good, dude. And plus, I'm a little biased. I have an airship in my in a story I've been working on a little bit recently.
Yeah, that's gotten a lot of feedback actually from people who both love the story and other readers who have been a little more critical of it. They've all loved the airship for some strange reason. I guess it's just airships are cool. That's my only guess.
They are cool. I do have something I wanted to ask in regards to that also. How do I explain? I'll say this nicely. Let's think. I'm a little tired this morning. Let's see. Of the criticisms that you've received, what percentage would you say has been good constructive criticism versus someone coming simply to dunk on your story because of who you are or what you believe?
Well, maybe I'm just considering myself lucky. I'm not entirely sure, but almost all of the criticism I've received for this book feels like it's been from a constructive viewpoint. Some reviews have been a little harsher than others, but none of it feels mean-spirited. Or at least what I've encountered so far, anyway.
And animation overload. Fiction has the ability to accentuate elements of reality in order to make them easier to notice or comprehend. That is a great way of saying it. Another way I compare fiction to nonfiction. Nonfiction can tell us truths about history and about people, but fiction can tell us the truth about ourselves. That's the way I've always viewed it. And did you learn anything about yourself in the creation of this story?
Yeah, I learned. It felt like as this story kind of developed. Well, it felt like as this story was developing, my life was also kind of changing as well. I had basically moved to an entirely different state. Basically got a clean slate with life. It was me going from a rough situation to a rather new chapter of my life that I came with a lot of challenges along its way. And sometimes you don't know what's going to happen next, but that, in a weird way, that's part of the fun of it, I guess. And it's almost weird. It feels like where I went from beginning to end of this story, it was kind of a similar roadmap to where Steel and Stormbright themselves go. They go from a rough place to a more optimistic but still uncertain road. And I don't know, in a weird way, for me, that's kind of comforting, because they're just as much as they're flawed characters. I see my heroes as kind of like an inspiration for me to try and be the best I can.
It's like your hero shouldn't be someone else in the world because they're a different person. Your hero should be you in 10 years. That's what I've been told. But also, before we continue, Chatsu just stopping by to smack that bunch before heading back to work. Woo! I appreciate it, Chatsu. And Chatsu, spoiler alert, your book is going to be in my next Amazon order that I'm putting together right now.
Ooh.
Also, I did read a dark fantasy poem on one of my reading streams from Chatsu, and dude, it was good. We're gonna get real ASMR up in here, but it was real nice.
Hell yeah.
Also, so that's something else too. I'm gonna bring up a couple of small criticisms about your story because I think that's only fair, and you and I have talked about this before, so it's not going to be anything new.
I would be a little concerned if there weren't any criticisms.
Yes. I'm like, for me, it's always hard reviewing books of people you actually know. It makes it feel, because a book, like especially a story, is so personal to the person who wrote it. A lot people pour a lot of themselves into those stories, and so that's why I try to word my criticisms in a way that is both respectful and hopefully helpful as well. And so one of my criticisms is we talked about names in the very beginning, and two of your characters don't simply have their own name and then another name like a moniker. They actually have 3 names. And so first we have Zolan, the younger of the 2 brothers here. His name is Zolan, and then his title later is Stormbright, which is fantastic. It's a great name. And then his moniker, I would say, is what was it? It was Warlock. Was it Warlock or what was it? It was a magician kind of word.
It's magician or a sorcerer.
Sorcerer, that's the one. I was having trouble thinking about it. But his moniker is magician, and I'm like, this is fantastic. You can refer to all three. It's a great. Each of his names is a part of who he is, and it makes sense. It's fantastic. It's like the Stormbright is the hero within him, the one who rose up from the ashes of the slave pits to become the master of elements as he does as the story goes on. Spoiler alert, by the way. And then there's his brother, Setharas. Main name, tremendous, love the name, great name. And then he becomes Steel, which very much represents his character. Steel is he's the man, he has no powers, but it doesn't matter because he is so competent that he will fight amongst those who are blessed by the gods, and he will stand on his own 2 feet. And then the small criticism, especially in regards to naming. His moniker is Thief.
Yep.
And he steals maybe once in the entire story. It's more of an aesthetic about him than an actual effective name and moniker.
And so far, that's been the most consistent criticism I have been given is Steel is a thief, but he hardly
also
steals
this is Steel. He's the thief, so to say. He has the headband. He's very much punk rock. Like, I do my own thing, and I don't respect authority. And this is Stormbright, a nice little cinnamon roll who got electric powers.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, it's a very valid criticism, and from what I've seen, it's something I completely missed until somebody had mentioned it to me. I went, "Oh yeah, that is a thing, isn't it?"
He's just a thief who doesn't steal anything. It's like a killer who doesn't kill anybody.
I mean, for me, that's a pretty easy thing to fix. Like, it's
a small thing, but just because naming is important and we've talked about it, I thought that would be a fun one to bring up.
Yeah, and it's definitely a valid criticism. It's something. It's probably a product of how so much has changed about the story over time.
Also, real quick, hi, Nikolai. Nikolai is a part of our Dark Augment stream as well, known as the man obsessed with explosions of Luther. But yes,
wielder of many pipe bombs.
Yeah, so he how do I say it? He's become the pipe bombs have been so effective in our gaming sessions that we've had to nerf them.
Just a little. Just a little.
Alas, yeah, continue.
Yeah, but it's definitely a valid critique. It's something that thankfully I can easily fix with hardly any headache at all. But yeah, it's something that someone going into this and reading it can be a bit off-putting because, I mean, he is sneaky. He does kind of lurk around a fair bit, but he doesn't really steal. He's not technically that much of a thief in this story. But,
yeah, not like in Razorfist's story, Xerxes, he's a thief. Like, he's a legit thief. It's his profession and his nature. It's who he is. And so that his title of thief actually makes sense. But moving on from that, maybe my biggest criticism of the entire book and story of Steel and Stormbright, I'll bring up that image real quick, is that I think my main I talked to you about this before as well, but I believe my main criticism is that it should have leaned a bit more towards epic fantasy or pulp. It could have gone either direction a little bit more and been good and been fine, but I do think it should have gone a little bit more in one of those two directions.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that too. Yeah, with the sequel I'm working on as of right now, I definitely want to lean a bit more into the pulp side of things. For me, that's where I see this going, kind of like in the sequel. And some of this,
it would be a very easy like correction, and it's like that kind of that's the thing about stories and how stories change. Like you and I talked about, stories change over time. If the sequel and other consequent stories that come out of this and spring from this world and these characters lean more towards pulp, whether we want it to or not, it will color the way that we view this story. And so even outside of your control, this story will change in the minds of the people over time.
Yeah, and the best comparison I can kind of make, and here's the thing, I'm not trying to compare myself in quality to this, but the closest comparison I can make with my book is with the first Thief video game, Thief the Dark Project.
Yeah,
And-
I know about it, but it's not something I've spent a lot of time on.
Well, how the video game started out was it was originally something entirely different. It was more of a medieval game called Dark Albion, and that had kind of went through its own issues during game
Isn't that the
development.
name of one of the nations within in the lore, or am I wrong?
Potentially. I don't know enough about the world of Thief because a lot of it is kept sort of vague, sort of
Yeah.
like the greater world anyway. But I remember distinctly they eventually got to a point where a small part of their team they were constantly thrilled about sneaking around this one guard, and they were saying, "Oh yeah, we have the rest of this whole game built around it, but this part right here is thrilling." And it kind of hit them there. Oh, we want this to be a game about thieving. And that's eventually what it became. But even still, you hear a lot of criticisms for the first game. Some of it is kind of like, even though Garrett is a thief, there are still some missions there where he's a tomb raider. Sometimes you're tasked with killing monstrosities whenever, if you're a good thief, technically you should just ghost around them. There shouldn't
true.
be any need to kill.
And
that's
animation
something-
overload brings up a good point here. Maybe you could just have the thief character steal more in the next book. And it makes me laugh, but it is true. If he does steal some more in the next book, his the moniker issue is corrected just by that alone.
Well, I'm happy to say that's exactly my plan for this next book.
Oh, and Stormbright's gonna be like, "Hey, we don't need. We're not slaves anymore. We don't have to do." He's like, "I want to."
Well, another part of my plans for this series, because a very big inspiration for Steel and Stormbright was Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. And one thing that I adore about that series that I want to do a bit myself is I love how it kind of takes the idea of two kind of like two bros, basically two lifelong friends, and it shows how they can do two entirely different things, but it still relates to each other. Even if it's like opposite ends of the world, it still shows how they eventually link up. And it's showing this kind of like weird contrast over time as they kind of like their paths cross, they go away, they intersect, but they're still kind of like contributing to the same goal. And
and that's something. It's special amongst like close people as well, and friends close as brothers. But I'll say this with brothers specifically, I have seen my brother once in my life since 2012, and because of some family drama, unfortunately, he's very much a black sheep of the family, and by his own choice, not our own, sadly. And I hate him and I love him and I miss him, but to this day, I think if we met up and we had to play a game or a video game or a physical event, I think to this day we would still dominate. And there's something about brothers specifically. It's a bond that isn't, even if it doesn't show itself at your day-to-day life, it's a very powerful bond that has a lot of staying power over time.
yeah, and that was one of the main reasons why I wanted them to be brothers, because instead of it going more the route of lifelong friends, I wanted it to be something a little more innate there, but it can still show how two very different personalities can still kind of get along and work together, and sometimes how they'll occasionally butt heads or go separate ways. That's the fun of it for me. And it's all about that relationship that's at the core of this that I really want to try and expand on.
Also, I gotta point this out. We have a lot of great suggestions in the chat, by the way. Timo, have him steal the Declaration of Independence in the next book.
Then when it comes to the movie version, I'll have him be played by Nicolas Cage.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration. It's fine. Also, I'll point this out too. And a lot of my people say oh, this is just my objective view of this story or this. Like, there's no such thing as fully objective when it comes to Mankind. And all of my opinions are subjective. Say, for example, Wrangler, he pointed out earlier that he liked the combination of pulp and epic fantasy kind of storytelling in your book, and I completely understand that. But then someone else, maybe it was animation or something, or I'm not sure who it was, but someone else pointed out, yeah, I would have preferred it kind of. It was trying to balance between two different subgenres, and it could have been better if it went more one way or another. But yeah, no, and like I said, a lot of this comes down to subjectivity.
Right.
And for me, I'd say the strongest thing in this book, maybe outside of the antagonist known as Karst, is that some of your scenes, some certain scenes in the particular, call back to mythology and epic fantasy and pulp in a very special and specific way. Some of the scenes in your book, they perform as they need to. They're scenes that they deliver exactly as they're meant to. But some of your scenes give me goosebumps, and they are powerful scenes. And I'm sure you know some of the ones that I'm talking about.
Yeah, and those are the moments in the book that I probably slaved over the most. I really wanted to make sure that was the final experience, because a lot of what really inspired me to do this was series like Berserk, Vagabond, Finland Saga. A lot of stories that make the emotion of the characters the forefront. And I wanted to put a spin on that that's a little more sword and sandal, a bit more high magic. And that's where this came about, really.
Well, straight up now, I'll tell you some of my favorite scenes. I'll keep it vague enough for anyone who hasn't read the story that it won't be ruined by a spoiler here and there, and that is the scene that I read in the beginning. It's in the very beginning, and that is where Zolan gets his powers and where he meets Kalamtu for the first and only time. Let's see, the next scene that really stands out. I'm kind of messing up the order here, but where Karst is appealing to her god in her own dark form of worship. That felt very old fantasy, dark, like Michael Moorcock style, like appealing to the dark powers that be kind of scene. And it really was effective in that as well.
That was another scene that was enhanced a lot more by beta reader feedback. I can probably point to...
yeah.
I can probably point to both Billy Bob Sack and Sybil. They probably helped the most with that scene. And for me, that was because, there's sort of like the stigma, depending on how it's done in storytelling, where kind of like sex appeal and more kind of like borderline smutty storytelling is usually kind of like in a derogative sense. But this is one of those rare instances where I went, I actually think it enhances her character. It actually
it fits really well, and I'm not just saying that. I fully believe that. Like it feels dark and in character and dangerous, and like she is messing with things she's messing with like careful what you wish for kind of thing.
Yeah.
Let's see here. But yeah, no, let's read a couple of the comments here because people are just funny and I love it. Let's see. Timo mentioned stealing Declaration of Independence. Herman offers maybe you could have him blow up the Death Star. Chill Kid says stick shift really drives a story. When will the Fast and Furious crossover happen? Yeah, you're in talks with like Paramount to make that happen, right?
It's TBD.
One thing I think I'd have liked to see a bit more of the brothers' struggle and the build-up of them being heroes. I would have been happy if the first half of the book was expanded on that and focused on that a bit more. And if you leaned a bit more epic fantasy, that would fit a bit better.
Yeah, I still kind of get his point, though. I have heard some criticisms that the story goes a little too fast at times. So it's definitely something I've got to work on a little bit as a writer, kind of finding that sweet spot between having it be fast-paced, but also not feel like you're going at 1.5 speed, I'm not a pro writer. I know a lot of things about writing, and I try to incorporate it into my own. It's a lot easier to criticize others than to create, and sure, as you know. But I do have a couple books that I would recommend you read in regards to affecting changes in your next story.
and that would be for pacing. For pacing alone, the book itself has some things I really disagree with. But The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moresi. The pacing in that book is one of the best I've seen in an indie project, period. Pacing-wise, that book is unmatched, in my opinion. It is really, really good. That, and then in regards to how to handle how much detail to put into the story in regards to making it a bit pulpier, I think none does it better than Michael Moorcock. I think he's the master of pulpy epic fantasy.
Oh yeah, definitely. I love Michael Moorcock's writing. For me, a lot of the writers who kind of helped me the most with kind of like finding a good balance and pacing, which I think for the most part I've done, but I can still improve. There's always something to work on. Michael Moorcock. There is also, of course, Robert E. Howard, Fritz Leiber.
Oh, dude. I haven't read Fritz yet. I think I have one of his books on my Audible account, though, so I'll be checking that out. Is that the Grey Mouser?
Yeah, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. I highly recommend that series. I think the last book or two kind of drops a bit in quality, but those first 5 or so books, in my opinion, it's some of the best old school fantasy you could read.
I'll say a slightly controversial opinion. I think that I'm going to put your book here in the description because I'm an idiot. Just give me a second. But I think in a longer style series, if it's longer than 3 or 5 books, it's gonna have some problems story-wise, almost inevitably. Like even the really long series, like I read 2 18-book series in the same year. Maybe not this last year, but the year before that. And that would be, I read the Dresden Files, and I read the mystery series, the Longmire mystery series as well. And I love both those series, but it's not strong all the way through. And for anyone wondering, there's a link to his Amazon book for Steel and Stormbright.
Yeah, and inevitably you are going to get problems like that story-wise for a longer series. And I think
even a series as long as 4 or 5 books, you're going to have problems.
I think that even applies to the masterpieces out there. There are some uneven parts. That's kind of the reason why I know for a fact no matter what I write, there are going to be those 1-star, 2-star reviews. It's going to happen no matter what you write. You could write the worst thing in the world, or you could write a masterpiece, but still you are going to inevitably get 1-star, 2-star, also a few 4 stars and 5 stars. There is going to be that variety.
For very run-of-the-mill stories, you're going to get 4 and 5-star reviews sometimes, and for stories that are both bad in quality, objectively and subjectively, you're going to get 1 stars, and that's just how it is. You're going to see everything. If you ever want to see a dumpster fire of the worst of what reviews can be, go look at the reviews for the Bible on Goodreads. It will blow your mind.
I'm not sure I want to check those out.
You don't, dude. It's toxic internet at its finest. Also, we got Billy Bob Sack with all these insightful comments, like it enhances her athletic teats. Otter likes more cock. You know how. Anyway.
Anyways.
Heck yeah, Skunk's Workshop bought your book, brother. Woo!
Thank you very much, Skunk's Workshop. I really appreciate it. It means a lot.
Skunks, you are a legend, my man. I really appreciate it. And that's something else about this book too that I really appreciate. It's not very long. It's at a sweet spot where it's a good chunk of story, but you can it's still not going to take you like 2 years to get through, like Royce maybe would. Actually, it still may take Royce 2 years to read it, but you know. Also, Chill Kid says I specifically avoided the Moorcock jokes. Chill Kid, it's a staple in my channel already. Anytime I get I show one of his books on channel, it's obligatory. I have to make a Moorcock joke.
Speaking of Michael Moorcock, yeah. I need to read more of his Corum books. I actually have it on my shelf.
I have a single book and then a trilogy. Old like vintage paperbacks I have. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I've read Knight of the Swords about a year or two ago, and I absolutely adored it. So I need to read the rest of the books in that saga.
I love all of his writing that I've read so far. But I think just Elric it's it, man. Like there's a reason my second son's name is Elric.
Well, there's a reason why a lot of fantasy series will at least make a lot homages to Elric, if not outright just copying,
Steal
pasting.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Warhammer Fantasy.
Hell, even series like Dark Souls and Elden Ring will make references. One of their bosses is called the Black Blade.
Oh yeah, like no, like, and that's the thing too. Any modern day dark fantasy, sometimes by complete happenstance, is inspired by Elric or inspired by things that were inspired by Michael Moorcock and his style of fantasy. Like you kind of had two different camps in the modern day fantasy. You have the Tolkienites, or I'd say three camps. You have the Tolkienites, you have the D&D style, which is inspired by Tolkien, and then you have the Robert E. Howard / Michael Moorcock darker style of fantasy kind of telling.
Yeah, it's very interesting seeing how a lot of literature inspired by D&D will go, because there's at least 2 or 3 different directions based on what writers were inspired by at that point in time. Because you have like your Tolkien camp, you have like your Howard camp right over here, then you have like Jack Vance, Fritz Leiber, Lord Dunsany. Then you have a lot more modern authors kind of like making their own spins, and that creates a whole new branch of it. So it's
too.
interesting to see what kind of variety is there, but it's not really talked about a whole lot.
Chill kid, how could you miss Moorcock? Anyway, that's by Billy Bobsack, of course. Now I kind of want to talk about other stories, not our own stories, or even stories of people that we know specifically, just other famous stories throughout history that we know of where... Let's talk about first about the negative. What about stories that changed for the worse? I have 2 examples. I'll go through one of them, and then you can talk about one of them. The first one I'll think of is the obvious one for me would be modern Star Wars, but that's like punching a dead rat. I'm not going to do it. What I'll talk about is Alien 3, the movie. Anyone who knows about anything regarding the behind-the-scenes BS of Alien 3, the movie, knows that the story started off with a really tremendous script. How do we know it? Well, it was released online a few years ago, and then they turned the original script of Alien 3 into a graphic audiobook. And I will say that it's one of the best graphic audiobooks, like sci-fi books, I've ever heard. I highly recommend it. It's on Audible. And so that's the story. That's what the story could have been. It could have been this tremendous story of heroism and danger and transformation and all of that. But behind the scenes, like pre-production of the film, they had wasted $11 or $15 million going through different writers who quit the project because they had so much mainstream production company they were demanding certain things, and then Sigourney Weaver was demanding certain things, and you can really see how the project changed from the good story that it was in the beginning into the questionable quality film that we got in the end.
It was,
and that's an example of a story changing over time in a very bad way, and that's like not even perception wise. That's just production. That's just how that story changed before it was ever released, let alone after it was released. And I think that's a good example of a film or a story that changed very negatively over time. Yeah, but what about you?
It's a classic example of too many cooks in the kitchen at one time.
It's actually a good preview for what's happening right now, if you think about it.
Yeah, I agree. Mine would probably be a lot more basic considering the last couple of years of controversy, but a good example of things changing for the worse is Lord of the Rings. Look at how treatment of that property has changed since Christopher Tolkien had passed away. There is a lot of it feels like fan fiction. That's the best way I can put it. Bad fan fiction.
And I agree. And like that's the thing too. How do I explain this? I love the books, but I also love the movies, and they are different. They are quite distinctly different.
Right, but there was still that element of
there was respect. It was trying to show a vision of what it really meant, and I think they accomplished that.
Right, and they definitely wanted to respect the source material as much as possible, and I think that was a key difference there. It wasn't subject to the political whims of the week or creator ego or anything like that. It was them trying to faithfully recreate the classic novels as much as they could. And I think despite the changes, they did a fantastic job. But
Yeah.
then since the passing of Christopher Tolkien, there's just kind of like it mirrors properties
Actually,
like
I'll
Star
toss
Wars.
something in there real quick. Even there were video games, certain good video games in Lord of the Rings that added to the plot, or added to the lore in a positive way. It was really and not all of it was canon, but even like Games Workshop Citadel, they had their Lord of the Rings game. They came up with really compelling backstory, believable in-world backstories for each of the 9 ring wraiths. And I'm like, it's not canon, but this is so damn good. It's so cool.
Right.
And it's like,
I
that's how you add to the lore. That's not whatever they're altering now with the story.
Yeah, and that's one of the great challenges about Middle Earth as a setting. It's not exactly a shared setting like something like Forgotten Realms, or you could even argue Star Wars is. Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth in general is a product of the mind of J.R.R. Tolkien. And even Christopher Tolkien was trying to honor
Further his father's. He was still trying to further his father's vision.
Yeah. And whenever you get something that's very
real quick,
focused
hail
like
John A. Douglas. Thank you for joining us, man. I really appreciate it. Actually, your channel is one of the reasons that I decided to make this show. And straight up, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you, man. God
hail
bless
good,
you.
sir.
Anyway, continue. You're correct.
Yeah, but I just think you have a very well-defined setting with Middle Earth. The very creation myth, thousands of years of history covered within Tolkien's notes, which were later adapted into the Silmarillion. Different stories he's made. Fleshing it out
he
even
has
further.
a lot of books that were compiled post his time on this mortal plane.
Yeah.
And some of them are quite good, and others are like, this is clearly not finished.
Yep. Some of the stories are a little on the drier side. Others are amazing. And it's a crime that they weren't published sooner.
Yep, I agree. And like that's a weird topic as well. People like authors dying and then unfinished work being published post their demise. For me, it's context matters a lot, but I feel a little bit weird about it. Like with Robert Jordan, there was a whole book of his that was written before his death, not related to the Wheel of Time, and it wasn't Robert Jordan, it was someone, but yeah, no, and they came out, there was a sequel for Andromeda Strain that was partially written by Michael Crichton, and they released that, and they finished it for him. I'm like, I don't know how, with Robert Jordan and the Wheel of Time, they had a plan for it, and his wife was the arbitrator of that plan, and had Brandon Sanderson finish the story for him. But a lot of these authors never intended to have these stories published, and there's a reason for it. I kind of feel weird about it. How do you feel about some of those experiences?
Yeah, and I think if we're specifically talking about Wheel of Time, I haven't read through the entire series myself. I'm still working on very early on in the series as we speak, but every person I've talked to who has finished the series, I've barely heard a negative thing about where Brandon Sanderson finished off that series.
Well, he did his very best to honor Robert Jordan, because he said it as much himself. Robert Jordan is one of his inspirations as an author and as a writing individual, and I'd say his modern series that he's made some of the series he's made post and since then, they honor the memory of Robert Jordan, but they also, in my opinion, surpass anything that Robert has written. And that's a spicy comment. But you haven't read the Stormlight Archive yet, so you need to get on that.
I'm speaking as someone who hasn't read any of Brandon Sanderson's work. I really should at some point. And
there's a reason he's the king of fantasy right now.
Yeah, even Wheel of Time, I have some pretty major criticisms of, even for the earlier books that are praised pretty well universally, but that's very much my opinion. That said, whenever Brandon Sanderson was pretty much brought on to finish Wheel of Time, I think this is one of the advantages of where Robert Jordan's wife was also his editor, because she knew him so closely as a person. On top of that, she was right there for the vast majority of what he was working on and the notes he was taking for the series. So you kind of have a lot of the spirit that and a lot of the themes and ideas that Robert Jordan was taking, and it could be fulfilled by one of his biggest fans. I think that's one of the best things that could have happened considering the circumstances with Jordan's death.
Absolutely. Also, where is it? Billy Bobsack, this is very wrong, and I applaud you for it.
Oh, God.
That's so... If you know, you know, and if you're too young, like AS, don't look it up. You're too young for that, sorry. Also, AS does bring up, I've read Mistborn 1 and didn't like it. Guys, I'm going to spill a little secret about Brandon Sanderson right here. Just come in here real close. Let me take this damn thing down. Hey, if you're going to read Brandon Sanderson and you're an experienced fantasy writer, do not start off with Mistborn. People say it's a good place to start. They're dead wrong. Dive in the deep end with Stormlight Archive, The Way of Kings. It's one of the best fantasy books ever put to paper. Or you could try, if you want a one-off story, you could try Elantris or Warbreaker. Warbreaker has a romance element to it, but it's still very good. Alas. Mistborn is not the place to start with Sanderson. Moving on.
I'll definitely keep that in mind whenever I try out some of Sanderson's writing.
Timo, my man. Anyway.
Hail, Timo.
Is this close enough for you, John? I'm just curious.
Anyway. But yeah, no. For any and all, I've quickly gone through. I've shown every illustration in the story. Oh, except for one, because it's a little spoilery. I can show them that one if you want, but I'll be like, you know which one I'm talking about. The one with a certain battle towards the end.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I will give a minor spoiler warning. It's not really that much of a spoiler, but yeah, I give you permission to, like, I'm fine with you showing it. Like, it's no problem with me.
Ooh, buddy, y'all ain't ready for this. This is a tremendous illustration from a tremendous part of this story. I love it, and so will you. I mean that directly as a threat. Also, John, just for that comment,
I mean this as a threat.
Say that as close to the mic as possible.
That's right, John. Say it to his kahunas.
I have tremendous... bro. You wrecked me with that. Anyway. Anyway, this is from a pretty climactic battle towards the end of the story. We have stars in the sky not facing up. Wonder what that means. Spoilers. We have all things going around. We have people flying giant eagles. The eagles are coming! And, yeah. And the giant long weapon there. Dude, I love this scene in the story. It's fantastic. Whenever you can find a reason for warriors to take to the sky in fantasy, I'm down for it, man. It's fantastic. Also, John, I want to let you know I did finish your book, The Black Crown, all the way through for the first time 2 days ago. And so I'll be writing my review for that as well. I'm very excited to talk about that book. Anyway, but yes.
I still need to check it out myself. It's right there on my shelf. I just need to read through it.
It's a long one, but John, I need to set up my studio for recording audiobooks so that I can put out an audiobook for The Black Crown. I would love to be able to have that set up by the end of this year. That's something I'm really passionate about. Yo, the animated moon, he has joined us.
Hail, good sir.
General Kenobi. There we go.
So uncivilized.
Oh my god. Herman says, my wife heard that in the other room through my headphones. I'm sorry, chat. I'll keep it down. Hail the Reverb King, John says. Okay, that works. This has been fantastic, man. But yeah, check out this another interior full page illustration by Neutron Boar of this very cool dynamic scene as well. But yeah, man, I think we're coming up on nearing the end time of this particular stream. So is there any other part of your story you're eager to talk about? I know you and I are both talked about this before. You know what? Hell, I'll just ask you. So, music and art and books. What are some of the main inspirations in each of those areas that inspired your story?
And this is a big area where something that you are watching or listening to later on kind of inspires you as you're still creating your story.
Therefore, changing the story on topic.
Yeah. And I think this influenced a lot of the overall tone and mood of the entire story. If you could compare Steel and Stormbright to a band, it would literally be Eclipse.
Dude, I love Eclipse. It's so catchy. Razorfist said it best. It's like, good luck getting these songs out of your head once they're in there.
Yeah, and I think it embodies a lot of what these two brothers are about. It's about pushing through the darker moments in life through parts that are painful, but coming out as a better person. And for me, that means a lot to me as a person. It's one of the reasons why whenever I first heard Eclipse, I went, I love this immediately. I think the first song I listened to was like, what is it? Never Look Back. And that's like, I don't know a single person.
Whoa.
Yeah, there's not a single person I've talked to who dislikes that song.
And there shouldn't be, you know. Any man with a functioning crank should like that song. Anyway, my standing desk is standing up because I can't sit down any longer. There we go.
Yeah, one other band I would like to mention is Beast in Black, because around the end they really inspired a particular fight, which is also illustrated.
Oh, which one? Which one? Is it the? Oh, is it the one? Oh, I know which one. I'll find it real quick. Hold on. This is the only one I haven't shown on stream yet. It is one of your main promotional pieces, though, which is a shame.
I promoted this one in the past.
There we
go. A major source of inspiration for this was Beast in Black. For one, I love their cover art. Two, their music is super catchy.
I'll be honest too. Like, I learned about them through happenstance, like an actual YouTube recommended band earlier last year, and I can't believe I hadn't heard of them before. It's like they have risen to be like a top 5 band for me since then. It's insane. But
the strangest
check out this art, guys. This is dude.
The strangest part about this is 2 days after I released my book, I got to see them in concert.
Oh, also, this is a little like, behind the scenes knowledge. Like, Otter lives very far away from me. In fact, the opposite end of the continental United States of America. And I almost, by happenstance, without any knowledge of each other, I almost ended up at that exact same concert.
Yeah, that's definitely the funniest thing. They're great at concert, by the way. Very good live.
I know, dude. Like, I'm not an envious person, but I was a touch envious when you told me you actually went to the concert. I'm like, wait, which one specifically? Like this one, like, son of a gun. I was this far from pulling the trigger on either going there or Texas to see them before they left. But I have kids, man. There's certain things I can't justify all the time.
Yeah, but this is a shout out to them because they were certainly an inspirational factor here. They did inspire some of the more, let's say, action and grittier parts of the story. That was a big part of it.
Absolutely. That reminds me, I need to do some promotion stuff for it. I've been sick, and it's the new year. I'm getting over Christmas and kid stuff, and mostly the sickness. It's just been a little rough for the first beginning of this year, but. Later down the line, guys, I am going to be doing another writing stream of the same style that I did with Maji-chan, who is in the chat. Except it's going to be very specific. I've invited a few people on. I need to set the date for it still, but we will use a random selector, maybe like paper names in a bowl, but we will use a single Beast in Black song as an inspiration, either by name of the song, the way the song goes itself, lyrics of the song, or whatever feeling the song brings up in us. We will use that to inspire a short story during a writing session. That's been an idea I've had for a while. And so, yeah. No, Lord Otter, as a fan, I'll invite you to that if you're able to make it, obviously. And yeah, that's a little idea I've had for a while. I'm excited to get that set up.
Yeah, I'll see if it can fit into my schedule. I really hope it does, because that sounds amazing.
I think I need to start planning things a little bit further out. I have a few booktubers that I've been talking about collaborating with as well, and so I'm excited to set some of that stuff up as well. But yeah, no, that's kind of the end of that. So those are some of the musical inspirations. What about art? Is there any particular art or specific books that you would put in that category as direct inspiration?
Oh, that's a bit of a tougher one. A lot of the art that really inspired this was something I kind of told Neutron more, but a lot of the cover art for the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser series was a huge inspiration. Just you see a lot of energy involved, kind of like there's usually like it's almost kind of like a comic book style, but also has that sort of like Frazetta-ish kind of like painterly look to it.
I love painted covers, man. It's such an underrated way of doing it, and most covers look nothing like that now. It's so disappointing.
Right, and those are some of my absolute favorite art pieces. And that's what I love about Frazetta. It's what I love about those covers. And I wanted to kind of see that brought back a bit more. You're already starting to see it, but I wanted to be part of it.
Also, just quick attention to detail with this specific image. This over here on the image itself, we have Stormbright right here, or Zolan, and then Setharas or Steel right here. And attention to detail by both Otter and Neutron Boar, they look much younger here because in this scene they are still kind of technically children, and so that's great attention to detail, man. Also, Animated Moon mentions Frazetta was the man. Yeah, dude, there's a art book collection of all of his illustrations, and I'm gonna be buying it here soon because it looks so good.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they have it available on Amazon, so it should. For anyone who's a fan, that may be worth the money for you.
I'm gonna have to check it out. You may have to send me the link to that.
Yeah, for sure. But those are some of the art inspirations as well. Was there ever? And then you mentioned Grey Mouser, and then obviously, I'm sure what were some of your pulp inspirations? What pulp kind of stories inspired you as you were going along?
Right. So, of course, I mentioned Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, so I'm not going to mention that again because I have
Fafhrd and Grey Mouser.
Yeah, Fafhrd and Grey Mouser.
Okay, well, let's not mention it again. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Obviously, Solomon Kane and Conan the Barbarian were obvious influences.
Obvious, yes.
But on top of that, a few other influences that were a little out of the way was some of Lord Dunsany's work, particularly the Gods of Pagana and the Lands of Time.
Wait, Tiagana?
Pagana.
Oh, darn it! I thought I knew of it. Never mind. Continue.
He's considered to be one of the fathers of fantasy before Tolkien had really kind of like brought epic fantasy into its form. There was Lord Dunsany in the early 1900s who was really building like the bare bones foundations of modern fantasy.
Real quick, so he would deserve the title of Fantasy Daddy.
There are a lot of people who do consider him the father of fantasy. He was a huge inspiration on a lot of writers I really revere. Like, I know he was a big inspiration on Clark Ashton Smith.
I haven't read anything of his, but I've heard the name. I know he's a predominant, like, progenitor of a lot of stuff.
Yeah, Clark Ashton Smith. Some of his style did inspire me a little bit. It's more his technical writing expertise that I really enjoy. As for another, and this one was also kind of, you see it mentioned a lot in different corners of fantasy writing, though a lot of people haven't read it, is some of Jack Vance's work, such as like the Dying Earth series.
I have him on my list. There's so much to read out there. I've read up to 109 books in 1 year, and there's still so many books I have not read.
So Jack Vance was so influential on Gary Gygax and a lot of the original kind of like first wave of Dungeons and Dragons that he just straight up made an anagram for Vance in the form of Vecna. That is Jack Vance. That's a homage to him.
You can't spell homage without home. Anyway, Hannah. Also, speaking of art, like this is like for some of my stories, the art style specifically and the feeling that it evokes for some of the horror stories I've been working on recently. I have this guy. His name is Berenger. He's a French artist, and he's inspired like John Ho, that really famous Lord of the Rings artist. They're really good friends, and so like art like this, like French painted fantasy art, is unmatched in how good it looks, dude.
Oh yeah,
Like,
I have
look
some
at
of
that.
the Elric bande dessinée over on my shelf.
I do
Also,
too.
some of the Sumerian issues, and oh my god, they're gorgeous.
The French, when it comes to art, sorry to say this, the French win automatically.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, yeah.
No contest.
I'll be honest. First, like everybody in this channel knows Razorfist. First time I heard him talking about French comics, I was like, all right, guy. I know I respect most of your opinions. Your opinions on first-person shooters are pretty bad, and a few other things. But I guess I'll have to check out this French artist and see what's. He's right. Sorry, guys.
I did follow his recommendation with the Elric bande dessinée, and that's a great way to kind of get into the whole kind of like bande dessinée French comics zone. It's one of their more. It's certainly a more modern series, but it's a great way to kind of like show this is how you can take a lot of like digital art and take it to some of the absolute like peak of its potential right here.
Also, unlike American and even to a point, manga, like Western comics and manga, the French are not shy at all about going in the direction of Western comics and fantasy comics. Like, this is a famous French bande dessinée comic called Thorgal, and the cover is gorgeous, but then you open it up and every page is like hand-drawn, painted, and colored, and all done by hand, and it's just this older style, but it's so fantastic. And every book, like every French book that I've picked up, looks that good or better.
The funniest thing about that is whenever I was first coming up with the name for the Curse of the Star Raids, I was playing around with a few different titles, and it inevitably came to that book. I went, oh, that's a very interesting cover. I wouldn't mind reading that, actually.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, no, so that's some of the art, some of the books, and some of the music that inspired you. And that's the thing, too. It's like, when you put together a book, specifically a book, it's so, even more than an image that an illustrator or artist creates, it is so personal. You're giving of your own experience, who you are yourself, but you're also drawing from the things that were poured into you in the form of other art, other people, other things, things that inspire you. And it's a beautiful thing to see that effectively illustrated on the page and with pen and paper, like you've done with your book. And like if anyone, I have a review for Curse of the Star Race coming out, and I'm trying to remember what my rating of it was. I have a very complicated out of 10 rating system that does take into account personal enjoyment as a factor. And I think I have it in the 8s somewhere. Maybe early 8s. I think over time, your books are going to be in the upper 9s. Or early to mid 9s. And that's a really high compliment. Almost nothing that I read gets into the 9 category. And so I'm very excited for the future of your writing, sir.
I'll happily take the 8, but I would love to be part of the 9 category.
Tremendous 9s. Big, beautiful, athletic. Billy Bob Syke, you know the word.
Athletic Bobs.
Athletic Bobs and Vagine. It's fantastic. Oh, did you see the Bobs and Vagine comments by Chill Kid earlier in the stream?
I did not, actually. Those went right past, and I did not notice them.
And don't get me wrong, Animated Moon, yeah, the French are more inspiring on average than the American comics, but there are plenty of American comics that, even though they inspire a lot of bad, they are inspiring themselves, like Death of Superman. I love this story. I love the art. I love what it represents. I hate what it inspired in the comic industry following the publication of it. But yeah, there's that. You got some of the French comics and even more recent works. Like, that's the thing about the Iron Age and such as well. It's giving opportunities to people who maybe in years previous would not have been able to publish their own story very effectively. It's giving them it's becoming easier and easier to successfully post and or publish your own works. Like Lore Olympus, I've talked about a little bit on my channel, was just a simple webcomic. And it became, I think it became for a while, the most popular webcomic of all time on that particular platform, and now it's published, illustrated, very colorful comic. And so yeah, and then it's all these changes have led to like this, even the small detail. Steel and Stormbright, Curse of the Star Wraiths, published by the Lord Otter. How many years ago would that have been a really weird thing to do, to have your online moniker be your name instead of for your published work, instead of either a false name or your real name?
Yeah, it definitely would have been a strange thing to even consider. Hell, even a year and a half ago.
I'd say even like 2 or 3 years ago, it would have been a very strange thing to do.
Right. And even whenever I was in the middle of writing this, whenever the name was still kind of a vague idea in my head, I always remember telling myself I want to adopt a pen name for this. For one reason or another, it was actually a whole bevy of reasons, but at the same time, it was part of it was just kind of coming up with a whole persona, which is, surprise, surprise, not really an otter, but, or am I? It really does kind of factor into marketing to a certain extent, which for me, it's also just a way to really have fun as a creator. That's why I like the pen name that I use now.
Sorry, 1 second, getting a message real quick. Also, I'll toss it out there. The music we've had in the background for this particular stream has all been by the wonderful and very talented Chill Kid. And he released an album just this Christmas, guys. Check him out. And yeah, no, it's an absolute honor to have him as on this stream. I'm very happy that he's allowed us to listen to this music in the background. It's been fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely fantastic music. I love the music that Wrangler plays for Weekly Wing It as well. It's just catchy. It's really fun.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, man. It's really good. That's the thing. We have so many talented people that we can draw upon in this space that we're both a part of. We have wonderful authors that have self-published or done audio, or have hired people to do audiobooks. Heck, there's a few people I've talked to who have produced audiobooks, and so I have a lot to learn from them. There's writers and artists and digital artists, or like James from The World Without End. He's a multifaceted, very talented individual who I'm sure we all have a lot to learn from. But yeah, no, it's been fantastic being in this creative space, despite me not giving much of substance myself. It's helped people like you, and I'm excited to see how it will help more people in the future.
Yeah, and I've even toyed with the idea of eventually making an audiobook, and at some point down the road, even the idea of a comic adaptation. Problem is, I don't know the first two things about either of those, so it's one of the...
I know a lot of people, so you can message me after the stream.
Yeah, it's one of the big advantages of having a group like us. We're individual thinkers, but we're trying to support each other on our own projects. So it's definitely just kind of like, I consider it a blessing. I have no better way of describing it myself.
100%, man. Yeah, and then you have people who are just insanely ambitious. Like, some people have had, like, through their own efforts, like Eric July, everyone's like, oh, well, not everybody can do what he did and pour all this money into the project beforehand and, like, really get... I'm like, first, he worked for all that money, so it's not like it's not him. It is him. He was just... He had the ability to invest, and he was able to produce and start, like, jumpstart this wonderful company known in the Ripperverse as we know it, based on his earlier time, money, and energy investments. And not everybody can do that, but then you have people like, I'll give a great example, A.C. Pritchard, who wrote the book The Mortal Descent. He has a comic being made. He is having an audiobook done. And he's doing all of this at once with very little monetary means. The man is an inspiration. And he's another one of those people who's just like, I am going to full commit. This is a full send situation. We're going for it. And it's I
keep hearing about it as well, and it's inspiring to me. I'm going, oh, like, already how many books does A.C. Pritchard have out now? at least one, maybe two.
No. He has one book out, and he has others on the way very soon. But he's also doing the free story known as Spirit Animals. He's also going to be doing a graphic audio performance-based version of that he will be releasing for free on YouTube. And a few people in our community who will remain unnamed may be involved in some of the upcoming episodes.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's inspirational, especially for someone like me, who, I mean, if AC Pritchard is already pioneering the way for me, that's someone for me to talk to and for me to learn from. So, I mean, all the more power to AC Pritchard. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, dude, it's fantastic, and there's so many cool people in this community. I myself am becoming good friends with 4 or 5 musicians here, which is insane because there's nothing about me that is a musician.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, it's like there are musician families. I have portions of the family that are they are the musicians, but I don't live close to them. We don't hang out all the time, so it's a very special thing. And plus, yeah, I also just posted the Bandcamp link for Chill Kid in the description below, or in the comments below. So guys, go ahead and check him out. He's fantastic. He also contributed to the album First Strike, the first Tempered Records, which is an offshoot of Anvil Magazine and IronAge.media by Richard. And he and a whole sleuth of others all collaborated to make that album. And each of them individually is highly accomplished, but I cannot express to you how excited I am to hear that record for the first time in its entirety. But alas, the Otter, I think, I'm happy to talk more, but we've gone on for a good amount of time. If there's anything in particular you want to shout out, but feel free to do it, or any other topics related to storytelling and or your book that you're eager to talk about. I'm all here for that. But
yeah, so I'm currently working on book 2 as we speak. Still fairly early on in the process. I'm hoping to develop it a heck of a lot more as the year goes on. Hopefully get that out by the end, but we'll honestly have to see. The name is still a working title, so I shall say no more as of the moment.
Son of a gun.
But yeah, you can also check me out on downstreampulp.substack. That's where I do a lot of my writing whenever I'm not.
If you can send me that link, that would help me too. I can post that too.
Yeah, I can go ahead and look it up and give you the link for that. But I'll also give a brief shout out to a few other writers that I think are really talented, are still trying to get their names out there. One who I see on Twitter all the time is Rob Rhymes. Like, his was literally.
I've read the first book. I need to read the rest of his series. They're so short and they're a lot of fun.
They're a lot of fun. That was probably the first. Probably with the exception of The Long Moonlight, that was the first Iron Age book I'd really checked out. And it was a great introduction into the Iron Age.
Oh, absolutely. Vincent Nunez asking is IronAge Legends going to be regularly scheduled? I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I'm not terribly organized, so I'm going to do my best. But yes, if I have my way, I will have an IronAge Legends once or twice a month on a given weekend that I am free. Because the way that it works is I go to work. I wake up between 4 and 6 o'clock. I go to work. I get home between 5 and 6. And most nights I have my children, and I'm with them until 8 or 9 o'clock. So anything creative I have to do is after that. But I have one weekend where I am free from 6 p.m. on Friday until the next Monday. And that's when I get most of my creative work done. So the way the IronAge Legends is going to work moving forward is it's going to be a lot like this. There's going to be comment participation, there's going to be questions, there's going to be discussion of a specific part of a story creation and or creation in general. And it's not just limited to authors. I'm going to include musicians and movie makers at some point. That's something I'm working on behind the scenes as well. And I'm very excited to schedule more people coming up. For sure, I believe the next person I'm going to have on here is MD Boncher with his Akiniwazi saga. which is a fantastic Christian style fantasy book, and his The Waking Nightmare sci-fi, like pulpy sci-fi series. But we have this, and then so he'll be one of our next upcoming guests as well. And also artists. I'm gonna have if an artist has impressed me thoroughly enough, I'm gonna have them on here as well. I'm very excited to have all of these people upcoming and to display their art and who they are to the world. I hope this video has helped illuminated some of the reasons behind the story of Curse of the Star Wraith, and shown you a little bit about who Otter is. He's a tremendous individual despite living in Florida, and I'm I'm very proud of my friendship with him, and I'm very happy that he agreed to be the inaugural episode of
Iron Age Legends.
So tremendous.
Tremendous. But yeah, and speaking of Animated Moon, I'd love to have you on here at some point as well. And so that's something that you and I can talk about behind the scenes as well. But alas, ladies, gentlemen, we have the Lord Otter with his debut novel, Steel and Stormbright: The Curse of the Star Wraiths. A tremendous book available by ebook, hardback, you know what I'm saying. You guys want a hard 11 inches? Go to Amazon. And softback book. Don't recommend, it's not as much fun. Now, that is his book 1, and hopefully, if he's able to hack it, he will be releasing book 2 sometime at the end of this year or beginning of next year. Is that correct?
As of this moment, that is correct.
Hell yeah!
I'm definitely going to try and keep everybody in the loop on progress for book 2 as the year goes on, because I want to be as transparent as I can with it. I don't want it to be just like, hey, 3, 4, 5 years have passed. Where is it? I don't want to do that.
Yeah, don't tease us, man. We need another 11 inches here stat. So get it ready. Alas, thank you all for coming. I love you all. God bless, and hail the Iron Age! Woo!